is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Schaefer live on a Wednesday night. We are mere minutes away from the release of the 2025 Ravens regular season schedule as Jonas wipes down his camera. That's a good reminder that we are live on a video platform. You can watch us every week on X and on YouTube. And if you're listening to us anywhere that you get your podcasts, you can write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show. Be so kind to give a thumbs up wherever you are watching or listening. Jonas and I are going to break down that schedule as soon as it is announced at 8 p.m. Eastern time, but we have a lot more to discuss here on this podcast. We're going to discuss some unfortunate news for a Ravens safety. We're going to get into, of course, the big ticket item first, though, Jonas, and that is the extension that running back Derrick Henry signed earlier today that keeps him in Baltimore through the 2027 season. And that's why our Who's Got It Better Than award goes to the 31-year-old running back. 2 years, $30 million deal, which takes him through that 2027 season. There is a team option for 2027, so could really only be through 2026. It reportedly has $25 million guaranteed. And Jonas, he played it absolutely perfectly. A year ago, we were talking about how the Ravens were perhaps overspending for a running back because the market had gotten so depressed. And we saw a couple guys sign big deals, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. And we thought, is it really prudent of the Ravens to spend $16 million on a running back? He proved them right. He ran for almost 2,000 yards. He ran for almost 6 yards per carry. And he cashed in with a 2-year extension. Derrick Henry played his market perfectly.
And it would be fun to play the hypothetical game of like basically going back in time, imagining a world where Dallas, his hometown team, because that's where he, resides during the offseason, if they had made a competitive offer and just like at what price point it would have been most sensible for him to actually do that, knowing that him going to Baltimore, him playing alongside Lamar Jackson basically helped him get this incredible payday. Like, I don't know that there's anywhere he could have gone in the NFL that would have maximized this next contract value as much as the Ravens. Playing with Lamar is like the ultimate PED for running back contracts. It's been said over and over, time and time again. It's how Gus Edwards got paid. It's how J.K. Dobbins would have gotten paid. Justice Hill obviously has a little bit of a different skill set, but he has obviously made the most of playing with a guy with that kind of gravitational pull. And you talked about who's got better than Derrick Henry, who's got better than running backs over age 30, because if Derrick Henry can do it in this modern day and age with, advances in science, who's to say that the next great, kind of hammerhead running back can't have this kind of staying power? Obviously, Derrick Henry is one of one. He is a workout freak unto himself. He's a beast unto himself. He's single-handedly determined. He's single-minded in his focus. But it's a pretty big investment for the Ravens considering his age. And I know that he basically is kind of defying his biological clock right now. But I think there are only 3 running backs in 4 seasons total with a running back age 31 or older who's gone for over 1,000 yards in a season. And I think we're all just expecting that for Derrick Henry over the length of his contract. And I think it's a safe expectation because of Lamar, because of this offensive line, because of the infrastructure the Ravens have in place. But again, that cliff is there. We just don't know how far in the distance it is.
Yeah, watching Orioles games this year has been a reminder to me that the cliff comes when you don't quite expect it, and it came for Charlie Morton, and it perhaps has come for Kyle Gibson, and it will eventually come for Derrick Henry, and sometimes that cliff is awfully steep. It's not like a lot of players go from their most productive seasons to then 80% of that, then 60% of that, then 40. Sometimes it goes from an incredibly productive season to 0, to suddenly you are not productive at all. And of course, injuries could play a big factor, and Derrick Henry has done a remarkable job. He has invested a ton in terms of time and money into keeping himself healthy. But there are injuries that you can't expect. There are injuries that you can't prepare for. And those are also a possibility. You talk about just the rarity of having a running back that is getting significant touches late into his career in this current day and age in the NFL. if Derrick Henry were to see this contract through and play each of the next 3 years, I looked at the last time there was a running back who was that age, who was still a productive player, he would be 34 at the end of that deal. He turns 34 in January of 2028. So if he plays through that 2027 season, he would be playing through his age 33 season. The last player, the last running back to run for more than 300 yards in his age 33 season was Frank Gore when he was age 37 in 2020. Frank Gore was similarly built different. He was built different in the way that he was able to maintain his body late into his career, but Frank Gore never had seasons like Derrick Henry has had. He has never had the rushing totals that Derrick Henry has had in his career. And Derrick Henry is one of one. He is unique, and that is why he is getting paid this amount. But we may be at the point in a few years where we're saying it might be prudent for the Ravens not to exercise that team option because at some point the cliff will come. But the Ravens, it's clear based on the season he just had, they have to keep riding that wave. And it was smart to get an extension done because you don't want to go into training camp with this hanging over anybody's head.
Yeah, and I think it's about what the smart people in the room were expecting. I think Joel Corey of CBS Sports nailed this like on the money in his column a couple of weeks ago or a couple months ago. I think he had 2-year deal, $30 million total. I'm not sure about the guaranteed money, but like for him to be getting paid an average annual value that is $1 million higher than I think Jonathan Taylor, who signed his extension a couple years ago. I think it's about what you would expect. It's about market value for that. It's not anywhere close to what Saquon got. It's not anywhere close to what Christian McCaffrey got. And that makes sense because for as special a player as Derrick Henry is, he is not going to be that, 3-down force. He certainly can be your punisher on 3rd and short, but he's not going to be the guy that the Ravens have in all likelihood on the field in 3rd and long situations. You want Justice Hill for those because of his blocking ability, because of his receiving ability. And he's also a guy that, you want to have fresh for the playoffs. And even though we have this notion of him as being a guy who, gets better as the game goes on, gets better as the season goes on, I think you do have to be a little bit more careful the further he gets into his 30s. So, it's a little bit interesting for the Ravens to invest this much money in the position, but considering just how good he was, leading the NFL in missed tackles forced, leading the NFL in rushing yards over expectation. If this offensive line takes a step forward as a run blocking unit, which I think is fair to expect, then Derrick Henry could easily top 2,000 yards next season, and that in itself would be enough to, like, no matter what the passing offense does, probably lift this offense into the top 10 overall.
Yeah, and a sneaky little storyline to follow as we get further along in Derrick Henry's career is where he ranks all time in terms of rushing yards. Because right now he is the leader in terms of active players in terms of rushing yards, and he is 19th in NFL history. He had almost 2,000 yards last year. If he has just 1,400 yards this year, I say just, that's still a ridiculously high total. But if he has 1,400 rushing yards this season, he will pass Tony Dorsett for 10th all time. So he is climbing up some leaderboards very quickly. And it's going to be very funny to look back at his career when he is an eventual Hall of Famer. And I do wonder if he is able to win a ring in Baltimore, if we'll think of him more as a Raven than we will as a Tennessee Titan, despite the fact that he had some ridiculous seasons in Tennessee. Even if he doesn't win a ring, it could be possible.
Yeah, I mean, he said he wants to retire a Raven. This is a good way of doing that. It's not like he gave the Ravens a discount or they paid him more than what he was worth. But I can't. I mean, it's so rare to have running backs this late in their career make a move to another team and then become associated with them. I guess you could maybe say Christian McCaffrey, but he was traded in his athletic prime and he played for like a decent Panthers franchise. I forget if he was there for their like Cam Newton Super Bowl heyday. But obviously I think he is now, looking back, maybe a little bit prisoner of the moment. He's now considered more of a 49ers icon than a Panthers icon just because of what he's been able to do and how he's been able to lift that 49ers offense. I'm sure some fans in Carolina would feel pretty differently about like whose hat he would represent in the Hall of Fame. But flags fly forever. And if Derrick Henry is the engine of a Ravens offense that leads them to the Super Bowl or to a Super Bowl victory, then people around the league, I think, are going to feel a certain way about this era of his career, and probably more fondly than they did about him as a Tennessee Titan.
Yeah. So Derrick Henry is locked up for the next few years. Let's switch to a much more depressing topic, and that is the fact that Ardarius Washington, Ravens safety, breakout safety in 2024, will miss most, if not all, of the 2025 season as he tore his Achilles during conditioning. Absolutely brutal news for Ardarius Washington, who was an absolutely incredible story. I mean, from an undrafted free agent who had played just a combined 8 games before this season in his first 3 seasons in the NFL. Then he plays 17 games in 2024, starts 10 of them, and plays significantly better than both Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson, 2 guys who have done a lot in their NFL careers. He came into this offseason as a restricted free agent. The Ravens brought him back, and then they drafted a safety in the first round in Malachi Starks, but I think you and I both expected Ardarius Washington was going to play a significant role on this team. Regardless of Malachi Starks' long-term future with the Ravens, odds were Ardarius Washington was going to be starting week 1 next to Kyle Hamilton, depending on how you were going to arrange your secondary. An absolutely brutal blow for a guy that has been an incredible story, and especially over the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's been one kind of escalating blow after another, because he went through restricted free agency, didn't get the kind of offer that would force the Ravens' hand in terms of a long-term deal. Then the Ravens take Malachi Starks, effectively, potentially knocking him out of that starting job, that full-time starting job, because if you're a Ravens safety, you're typically playing 100% of the snaps. And then to tear your Achilles, with a non-contact drill during offseason conditioning at the Ravens facility, while you were, attempting to stand on business. If you remember that whole, Twitter episode where he was kind of tweeting a little bit cryptically, and he said that he would SOB, stand on business. It's heartbreaking for him, because with another good year, I think he could have won over a lot of folks around the league and proven that even at 5'8", even with his early career injury history, he could have been someone that you spend a lot of money in, or at least a decent amount of money in. And now, he's going to have a depressed market. He's probably going to have to come back to Baltimore on a prove-it deal, and he's going to have the same questions about his viability as a long-term contributor in the NFL. I mean, that's what sunk his draft stock in the first place coming out of TCU, despite his extreme productivity there. So it's back to square one for him, and it's kind of back to square one for the Ravens safeties, because if the whole goal this offseason was to get Kyle Hamilton into a position where he could be as reliably effective and disruptive close to line of scrimmage in the slot, then you're kind of stuck with him for the moment, being just that split safety duo with Malachi Stark, which again is a nice problem to have, but you want someone else who can step in there and not be an Eddie Jackson, not be a Marcus Williams. Maybe it's a Sanusi Kane, maybe it's maybe it's a Bo Braid, maybe it's someone from off the street that they bring in and does a good, competent job. But again, it would be a shame if the Ravens couldn't find the money in their couch cushions to find a safety who could let Kyle Hamilton be the best version of himself.
Yeah, and boy, was it serendipitous that Malachi Starks was still on the board for the Ravens in the first round, because if he were not there, and if they had passed on Nick Emanwari, who went in the second round to Seattle, I don't know what the Ravens would be doing right now in order to fix that safety position, because they are going to be relying on Malachi Starks, a first-round pick, a late first-round pick, a whole lot. And certainly everything that we've heard and seen of him, he is up for the task. But we saw just how much Kyle Hamilton struggled in his rookie year. It's highly possible that Malachi Starks has the same kind of struggles. And there's definitely going to need to have some depth behind those two, because we have talked about the importance of the third safety role on this team. The only other 2 safeties on this roster that I would consider worthy of playing time at this point, Bo Braid, who was an undrafted free agent out of Maryland last year, played 11 games, mostly as a special teamer, played just 11 defensive snaps, and Sanusi Kane, 15 games, mostly as a special teamer, 22 defensive snaps. And the possibility of adding a veteran makes you think back to and shudder to how everything went with Eddie Jackson last year. But at the same time, probably need to add another body there because I'm not sure Sanusi Kane and Bo Braid are quite ready to make that leap.
Yeah, it's always tough to project those guys. You know, Bo Braid was supposed to be a day 3 pick, fell out of the draft, I think, because of concerns about his athleticism. Obviously, Sanusi being as available late in the game as he was. Also, some of the same kind of limitations, but you don't need to be like a 4-4 guy to be an effective safety. You know, Marcus Williams was as good as he was for as long time as he was by being like a 4-5, 4-5-5 guy. Kyle Hamilton obviously is not an incredible linear athlete, even though he's, you know, among the best in the world at the other kind of athleticism. So maybe there's, you know, outside the box solutions. Maybe it's Marlon Humphrey lining up at safety in some situational positions. Maybe it's TJ Tampa, even though it sounds like the Ravens are still pretty committed to giving him a look at cornerback. There's a lot of different ways that the Ravens could go, from in-house to outside the house. But it's still just a bummer because of what this safety group could have been with 3 guys with as many interchangeable talents as Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks, or Darius Washington.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out some names of free agents who are still on the street: Justin Simmons, Jordan Whitehead, Julian Blackmon, Quandre Diggs, Chuck Clark, an old friend. And here's a curveball, Jonas, that I don't see the Ravens swinging at all. But do they bring back Marcus Williams to be their third safety? In what world would that occur?
In no world will that occur.
All right, well, that's a shame. All right, well, we are past 8 p.m. Eastern time, which means we have the 2025 Ravens schedule. And I'm going to throw it up here on the screen for those who are watching live. And boy, it is stacked with some outstanding games. 3 games in prime time and 4 if you include their game on Thanksgiving. Week 7 bye. And Jonas, I'll run through the schedule real quick before we break it all down. Week 1 at Bills. So the season begins where the last season ended. That's a Sunday night football game on September 7th. Week 2 at home against the Browns on September 14th. Week 3 at home against the Lions. Then week 4, they go at Chiefs on September 28th. The Lions game, by the way, is a Monday night football game, so another 8:15 start. Then home against the Texans, home against the Rams, bye week, home against the Bears in week 8, at the Dolphins in week 9, at the Vikings in week 10, at Browns in week 11, home against the Jets in week 12, home against the Bengals in week 13, home against the Steelers in week 14, at Bengals in week 15, at Patriots in week 16, and then 2 TBDs. We don't yet know the dates or times of these games, but week 17 at Packers, week 18 at Steelers. So as has become tradition, they close the season with a run of divisional opponents, and they are going to Pittsburgh in week 18. They play on Thanksgiving against a divisional opponent on November 27th at home against the Bengals. So the Ravens and the NFL are just intent on making sure that neither Jonas nor I nor our other beat writer, Gianna Hahn, nor Kyle Goon gets any kind of actual holidays, because last 2 years Jonas was on the road for Christmas, and now it's at home against the Bengals on Thanksgiving. Jonas, word of the day, Crucible. Do you have a definition, or are you just going to roll with whatever comes out of your head here?
Something that you go through to test yourself, right?
Sure. Also a play.
I don't have the definition handy. Yeah. Shout out to all the witches back in Salem.
Why is Crucible your choice of word of the day, Jonas?
Because you would only let me choose a single word and not a phrase. I used this comparison last year to describe the first half of the Ravens schedule as pertained to Zach Orr and the gauntlet that awaited him. But I really do think like those first 6 weeks for the Ravens are basically like the pain box in Dune. Like if the Ravens can get through to the bye in week 7 without having totally collapsed under the weight of 4 Super Bowl favorites and another reigning division champion, they will be fine for the rest of the season. But if they start slow, as they have the past 2 years now, and something goes wrong or some things go wrong, then they could be playing catch up with a schedule that the rest of the way is a little bit more forgiving, but not all the way forgiving. So, it's a crucible, it's a pain box, it's a gauntlet, it's a lot of stuff. But what it is not is easy. That is just a brutal first couple
It
weeks.
is. And last year, obviously, they started the season at Kansas City in what was an incredibly exciting game, but also an incredibly difficult game to watch at times because of the penalties, because of the horrible war flashbacks that we were getting to the way the season ended the year before. And now we have the opportunity to get that all over again, because starting at Buffalo, hopefully the weather will be a little bit warmer than it was the last time we were there. But we again are going to be going into the season talking about, well, the Ravens will try to get revenge, but at the same time, this doesn't really mean anything because it's just a week one game. And who knows if the Ravens will end up facing the Bills in the playoffs? Who knows if they'll have to go at Buffalo again to get through it? And who knows how these two teams are going to be by the end of the year? So doesn't matter again, really, the result. Obviously, it'll matter in the standings, but it won't. Winning week one won't change the result of how things went in Buffalo in January. Whether you win, that won't change anything, and whether you lose, that should not really affect how we view this team and their ability to get over the hump. But Jonas, why don't you give us 5 gotta have it games? If you're looking at this schedule and saying, what are some easier wins that you can pull off that the Ravens need to collect, what would you have topping your list?
Let's just throw out the Browns games because I have those as the 2 easiest games on the schedule. If they dropped a game last year in Cleveland, which they should not have. So I guess anything is possible. Like I think one of those games will probably be at least mildly competitive, but week 2 versus the Browns, that should be like a double-digit spread for the Ravens. Just also as a reminder to people of the folly of trying to predict which of these games will be the hardest and which will be the easiest. Looking back at the exercise that I did last year, where I tried to do hardest to easiest. Do you want to take a guess, Paul, at the quote unquote easiest game that I had projected for the Ravens in 2024?
Probably the Raiders. That they lost?
No, they were second easiest, and the team that I chose, the Ravens actually did kind of steal their lunch money, but it was the Denver Broncos who had a good season, had a great defense and everything. So it just goes to show so much can change in the NFL from year to year because of coaching changes or quarterback arrivals or this or that. Injuries obviously loom large, as we've already talked about with our Darius Washington. But for some of those kind of wild card games that I think the Ravens can't afford to fumble, I think you look at the Dolphins game, week 9. That is almost 4 years to the day that Lamar went down to South Florida and just could not, and Greg Roman as well, he bears some responsibility, could not solve that Brian Flores covers 0 defense. That was just such an ugly game. It's going to be a short week, Thursday night football game, but the Ravens can't drop that one. The Miami might be spiraling by now. By then, Tyreek Hill might have already been off the team because of the trade deadline, which is usually going to be week 9, week 10. So that's a game that they can't drop. I think you come back from the bye in week 8 against the Bears. To me, like they are the biggest wild card on the schedule because you have a first-year coach in Ben Johnson. You have a former number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams. You have a really good defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen, who's getting his hands on a defense that has been good at times in 4 stretches over the past couple of years. And, it's the classic, young team on the upswing that if you catch them in the wrong week or if they are actually legit, they could be a team that really punches above their weight. So I think week 8 against the Bears is something that they can't afford to lose, especially at home, especially coming off the bye. Week 12 against the Jets, New York, no doubting the high-end talent on that defense, Sauce Gardner, Quincy Williams. But again, this is a young, talented offensive line, but Justin Fields is still a quarterback. There's not a whole lot of wide receiver help, not a whole lot of tight end help. So the Ravens will get them in Baltimore. You got to feel good about their chances of winning that. But, it's going to be a team that plays like it's coached. And, I think Aaron Glenn, by virtue of what he did in Detroit, by virtue of what he did in the NFL, has shown us that, like, you should never overlook his team, never overlook the unit that he's coaching. So I think that could be a game that, maybe is like a 7.5 point spread for the Ravens, but ends up being kind of a close one at the end. Another game the Ravens, I think, have to have week 16 against the Patriots. That's another home game. They should be heavy favorites in that one, but who knows what Mike Vrabel's first year in New England is going to look like. Who knows just how transcendent or average of a talent Drake May will be by that time. You still like the Ravens to take care of business in that one because it's not a great Patriots offensive line, even though Will Campbell, I think, certainly raised their ceiling. So I think that's something that even with the, kind of splashy signings that the Patriots made on the defensive side of the ball, grabbing Neil Williams, grabbing cornerback Carlton Davis, you feel like the Ravens should have the advantage in a couple of different phases there. And then the last one, I guess I'll just go with, maybe the home game against the Bengals. You could definitely make the case that this is one of the 5 hardest games on the Ravens schedule because any game against the Bengals should be awfully competitive. But the Ravens they're going to play at home. They're getting the Bengals on short rest because it's a Thanksgiving Day game. And Cincinnati just has been absolutely dreadful in AFC North games on the road in prime time. I think they've been 1-6. They're 1-6 since 2009. Since 2019. So it's unfair if you're a Bengals fan. It's very advantageous if you're a Ravens fan. But again, if the Ravens have any hopes of winning the division, if they have any hopes of being a number 1 or number 2 seed in the AFC, those kind of high leverage games against the Bengals in prime time will, I think, really go a long way toward establishing the Ravens.
Yeah, and the Ravens losing a couple must-win, gotta-have-it games, a couple games that at this time last year we were saying the Ravens simply cannot lose that game. I mean, the Broncos they beat, they were your gotta-have-it number 1, but losing to Las Vegas in week 2, that helped, build the backbone of this team because then they go on a win streak shortly after that. But in the long run, it really hurt their standings in the AFC. The fact that they had to go to Buffalo and play in a frigid, cold field up in Buffalo was certainly not advantageous. And so those kind of games pile up. So you want to be able to pick up the wins over the teams that you need to beat. In terms of the 5 best games, though, on this schedule, Jonas, the 5 games that we are watching the closest, I mean, you have to start with the game at the Bills in week 1 on Sunday Night Football. I think, obviously, a rematch at Kansas City in week 4 is going to be a 4:25 game. I'm kind of surprised that's not in prime time because that's going to be an excellent game as well. I'm interested to see how the Chiefs look after getting smacked in the Super Bowl. The Lions game in week 3 on Monday Night Football, another team that I think is poised to take a step back because they lose their coordinators. But at the same time, you trust Dan Campbell. You trust the infrastructure that they've built there as well. At Cincinnati on Thanksgiving in Baltimore is going to be a heck of a game. And you mentioned just the volatility of Cincinnati. I mean, if things do work out for them, that could be the team that the Ravens do end up battling by season's end. And then the last one, one of the 2 games that we don't know the date of is week 17 at Packers, because that was a team that disappointed down the stretch, but Jordan Love still has all the talent in the world. A guy that you and I thought would be an MVP candidate last year wasn't able to put it all together, still struggles with accuracy, still struggles with, turning that athleticism into winning play. But that should be a fun game if both those teams are in playoff contention. So a heck of a schedule, I think you could say, as you look at the 17 games right now. And the fact that the Ravens right now are, playing, have a week 7 bye, I should say, is thrilling because, last year it was just a little bit too late in the schedule for everybody.
I mean, not for the Ravens. They stayed healthy all year basically until Zay got hurt. So, obviously the week 7 bye it's not like it's going to help our Darius Washington come back in time. Just a quick correction for you, Paul. That at Bengals game is December 14th.
Sorry,
the week 13 game against the Bengals is the Thanksgiving night game in Baltimore. So that's a quick correction. Yeah. I think the Packers game is super intriguing to me because it's kind of surprising to go back and look at some of the efficiency metrics. Like they were a good defense, like a downright good defense last year. I think they were number 7, number 8 in DVOA last year, which is not really what you would expect. Like they didn't really have that great of a pass rush. Jair Alexander, I think, only played 7 games. And by the way, that's a fun subplot for that game. If he's still on that Packers team, finally getting a Louisville reunion between Jair Alexander and Lamar Jackson, that would be a very, very fun one-on-one battle. But that Packers team, if Matthew Golden hits as a wide receiver, and if Christian Watson, who tore his ACL toward the end of last year, it sounds like he's ahead of his recovery process right now. So there's a possibility that he is maybe good to go, maybe fully healthy by the end of the regular season, and that ends another weapon for Matt LaFleur, for Jordan Love, for that very, very talented Packers defense. That was one of the that's one of the games that I'm picking the Ravens to lose, just because going to Lambeau that late in the season, probably with adverse weather conditions, maybe a fully stocked up Packers receiving core. I just think that could be a really, really interesting game between two of the 3 or 4 best offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking at the schedule right now, we are in mid-May. We are months away from training camp as well as the start of the regular season. But Jonas, I want to get your win-loss prediction for the Ravens 17-game slate as we stand. What do you have the Ravens at when season ends?
Before we go there, let me ask you, what would be a acceptable record for the Ravens if you're Harbaugh through week 6?
Through week 6, I think last year at this point, I remember saying, well, the first 6 weeks were going to be such a gauntlet for the Ravens that they really just had to go 300, and then they surpassed our expectations and went on that win streak and just lost those first 2 games of the season. So if you're looking at those games, I mean, I think if you are 3-3 when you hit the bye in week 7, I think that's perfectly acceptable, because if you lose at Chiefs, at Bills, and home against the Lions, or maybe the Texans or Rams game, I think that's fine, because I think you can also go on a little bit of a win streak once you get past the Vikings in week 10. What do you think, Jonas?
Yeah, I think 3-3 would be acceptable. I think that's the bare minimum. You could probably talk yourself into shooting for at least 4-2, because 4 of those games are in Baltimore, and the home field advantage with the Lions game being a Monday night game, and then you get the Rams making a cross country flight to play an early afternoon kickoff. You've got a Texans team that with CJ Stroud has scored a grand total of 0 offensive touchdowns in those 3 blowout losses to the Ravens. So it's pretty easy to talk yourself, I think, into at least 4-2. But again, all these teams are going to have, besides the Browns in week 2, will have at least 1, in some cases 2 elite units that they'll be bringing to Baltimore that the Ravens will be facing. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think we'll have a pretty good sense of just where the Ravens stand in the NFL pecking order by that week 7 bye. But literally nothing would surprise me besides a loss to the Browns, because they're the Browns and they're coming to Baltimore. Let me flip another question to you, Paul.
Sure.
At what point do you seriously entertain the Ravens having an undefeated season if they are undefeated by week whatever?
We could be talking about them being 0-1, and that's highly possible. So
that's not the hypothetical.
If they beat the Bills in week 1, the Browns in week 2, Lions in week 3, Chiefs in week 4, I think they'd have to get to the bye at least for us to be saying this is going to be a really special season, and they have a very good chance to get the 1 seed. To get an undefeated season, I'd be looking at if they start 9-0, if they beat the Vikings on November 9th on the road, and then after that, you're talking about Browns, Jets, Bengals, Steelers, Bengals, Patriots, Packers, Steelers. That's much more doable than going 9-0 in their first 9 games. If they go 9-0 in their first 9 games, Jonas, you can come up with some kind of insane bet to to make me follow through with. Because it's
that's
not
fair. The Viking listeners, viewers, comment below. Give us 5 stars for why Paul is wrong and why the Ravens will be going undefeated this season.
That's it. Turn me against the fans.
that Week 10 game is low key kind of awesome because the Vikings have a incredible amount of skill talent on offense, and that defense was second in the NFL in DVOA last year. They added some help for their run defense. Oh, and by the way, this is going to be the first game that Lamar's played against Brian Flores since that 2021 game where he couldn't figure out the blitz, where he couldn't solve cover zero. Obviously, Lamar has come a long way since that game, but Brian Flores has also come a long way from that game. Could be a really fun matchup between two, potential head coaching top candidates if Todd Monken and Brian Flores both deliver on their 2024 success. So I think that's another game that I would have like being among the 5 or 6 most difficult for the Ravens 2025 season. But as far as overall record, my way too early projection was 12-5. I think I have them. Let me have it right here.
Really going out on a limb. That's probably their over/under is probably going to end up being 11.5.
I think it is 11.5. Yeah. So I am a bit of I'm a bit of a coward. I don't have my predictions here with me, but I think I have them dropping 2 of their games early. I believe I have them losing to the Rams and to the Lions. I have them losing to the Vikings. I have them losing to the Bengals in Cincinnati, and then I have them losing to the Packers in Week 17 at Lambeau.
Last year, I had the Ravens winning 10 games, but still getting into the playoffs because I wanted to be different. I wanted to be edgy, Jonas, because everybody on our staff.
And then you decided that you were going to pick the Ravens not to lose again into the Super Bowl.
I did. Halfway through the year, I decided to add another bet. You got to throw out as many of these predictions as possible because one of them will hit. But I did predict that the Ravens last year would go 10-7, but still get in the playoffs. But I did have them losing in the divisional round to the Bills. You can look that up on the BaltimoreBanner.com where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. But this year, I don't think I'm going to be as pessimistic on this team. I think I'm going to have them winning 11 to 12 games. And I'll go with you. I'll say, you know what, Jonas? I want to be different. I'll say they're winning 13 games this season. I think that they're going to go on an absolute heater in the second half of the season. And I might just get on this podcast again and say they won't lose again until the Super Bowl, if in the Super Bowl. So you never know. But I have a good feeling about where this roster is sitting right now, and I have a good feeling about their ability to start the season at least more prepared than they were last year. So I don't see an 0-2 start coming, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't see an 0-2 start either because, again, the Browns. But yeah, it's. I mean, you just talk about the quarterbacks within that first stretch. You get Josh Allen. By the way, we didn't even talk about how Lamar is not going to talk about the MVP discussion from last year, although we will certainly rehash it in a lot of fun, interesting ways. Then you got Jared Goff in Week 3, Patty Mahomes in Week 4, CJ Stroud looking to bounce back in Week 5, Matthew Stafford Week 6. Then it's a little bit of a break until you kind of get into the Joe Burrow stretch of the calendar. But yeah, I mean, maybe not as many kind of elite quarterbacks on this schedule as elite teams, and that could be the potential decider if the Ravens, are going down to the wire in all these games. The Ravens are going to have Lamar, who again was one of the most clutch quarterbacks in the NFL last year, and these other teams are not going to have Lamar, or in some cases not anywhere close to a Lamar on their on their sideline leading their offense. So maybe that is the thing that pushes the Ravens from a 10 to 11 win team to a 12 to 13 win team. But, you never know. These quarterbacks kind of rise and fall without any rhyme or reason, and players get hurt, schemes get figured out, weird stuff happens, and all we can do is just kind of throw darts at a meaningless board right about now.
I think when we did our schedule release last year episode, Jonas, you wondered whether Nick Sirianni would still be coaching the Eagles when the Eagles and Ravens met late in the season. And not only was Nick Sirianni still coaching, he ended up coaching them to a Super Bowl. However, I will say through the first 5 weeks, it looked a little bit dicey. It looked like maybe he might be on the hot seat. I don't know if there is a coach right now. There is a team, when you look at the Ravens schedule, where you could say, when the Ravens face that team, that coach will not be still coaching. I think there is a possibility, though. They wouldn't do it. Pittsburgh would not let go of Mike Tomlin midway through the season. But I think there is a real possibility. I think we're going to talk more as the offseason continues about the division and the kind of weird offseason that every team in the division had. I think the Steelers had the worst offseason of anybody in that group. I don't think it's particularly close, even if they bring in Aaron Rodgers. So I do think that there's a possibility that when the Steelers meet the Ravens for the first time in Week 14, that's Pittsburgh team is an absolute dumpster fire. So I think that that's a possibility, but I do think Mike Tomlin will still be coaching that team. But do you see any coach getting fired before the Ravens even face them?
I think they could get Mike McDaniel fired in Week 9. I mean, it's tough to see a team parting ways with a coach like before the trade deadline. I guess I'm trying to remember when exactly the usual timetable is for like the first coach fired in the NFL. But again, that Miami team just seems like a tinderbox with Jalen Ramsey wanting out and Tyreek Hill maybe being on the trade block, and Tua's health is always a concern.
Dennis Allen was fired very early by the Saints last year. I think it was like maybe 7-8 games into the season last year.
Yeah. Maybe if things are really, really bad in Cleveland with both on the field and off the field, then Week 11 could be a potential coach for your game type setup for the Browns, for everyone on that staff, perhaps. Because again, that would be a home game. That would be an island game, or kind of an island game, kicking off at 4:25. The Jets aren't going to fire Aaron Glenn Week 12, so not really a whole lot of pack your bags and go home type stakes for these teams. I mean, like maybe Mike Vrabel's feeling the heat by Week 16, but I think he's probably here for at least another year in New England. But yeah, I would probably say Week 9 against the Dolphins and Week 11 against the Browns, both road games, both games where the Ravens, if they just put a hurting on Miami and Cleveland, it could be a pink slip game.
Yeah, could be. All right, Jonas, we were going to have months to talk about this schedule and months to make our more inaccurate predictions before the season starts. OTAs are just a couple of weeks away. We are going to take a break next week. No podcast for the first week in a long time. But we are going to be back with some great OTAs content at the Castle. Hoping to have Kyle Goon on, hoping to have Gianna Hahn on, if their busy schedules allow them to join us here in the Banner Ravens podcast. In the meantime, like, rate, review, subscribe. And if you haven't already read Jonas's and Gianna's ranking of the Ravens 17 regular season games, you should, on the BaltimoreBanner.com, as they break it all down for you. And if you follow at Balt Banner Sports on any social media platform, ignore the schedule that I posted that was incorrect, that I had them going at the Steelers twice. I did, however, Jonas, go back and correct it. I deleted the post, or I replied and acknowledged the error, because that would be a heck of a decision by the NFL to make the Ravens go to Pittsburgh twice. I don't think that they would do that. You want to make 2 trips to Pittsburgh?
It's drivable. It's not fun, but it's drivable. But yeah, I think all the conspiracy claims that Ravens have about NFL officials would certainly kick into overdrive by virtue of you willing this into existence. But I'm glad that you realized that you screwed up and you fixed it. Yeah.
Are the Ravens gonna give us turkey and mashed potatoes in the press box on Thanksgiving night?
I think they'll give us pumpkin pie. I don't know. Okay. They're giving us the gift of football and family.
They're pulling us away from our family. What are you talking about?
That's true. Were you planning on going back to Philly for Thanksgiving?
Every Thanksgiving, you got to spend with the fam, Jonas. Until I have kids of my own, you gotta spend the time with the family when they get the opportunity. But Jonas, you're my family now, or at least you're gonna have to be, because we're going to be spending Thanksgiving side by side. Can't wait.
It's a Fast and Furious type family where we're not actually family, but we just say family a lot. And then it kind of family. How
many of those movies have you seen?
I think the first one that I actually saw in theaters was Tokyo Drift, which is okay. Kind of weird. I think I've only seen 2 or 3 of them in theaters. I don't think I've seen the last few like actual Fast and Furious franchise movies because I also haven't seen like Hobbs and Shaw. So I'd say maybe like I don't know. Are
the
there
Fast and Furious
8
franchise
total?
universe,
How
expanded
many
universe?
total Fast? How many total
I don't
Fast and
know.
Furious movies are there?
I do know. I do like their bit that they never stay with the same naming convention though. When they go with all the sequels, like they always change how it's Too Fast, Too Furious, and sometimes it's the number 2. They mess with it every time. I think that's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, it looks like we're at Fast X, so
Okay.
I've probably seen like 5 or 6 of them.
Instead of the
Also,
17 regular season games, you should have ranked the Fast and Furious movies.
Man, the only franchise I'm thinking about right now is Mission Impossible, Paul. I was disappointed, frankly, to see that the reviews for Dead Reckoning or Final Reckoning, whatever it's called, are a little bit mixed because I was really hoping to just have like the time of my life watching Tom Cruise almost kill himself, but it seems like it's a kind of bloated 3-hour affair. I'm still going to probably go opening weekend and have a great old time. But yeah, I was really looking forward to getting myself hyped up by rewatching some of the later installments of Mission Impossible. And now it feels like it might be just kind of an empty exercise if I'm just building up to a movie that might be one of the worst of the franchise itself.
Well, maybe if it's Dead Reckoning now, maybe they should change it like Thunderbolts did to the New Avengers and make it Final Reckoning. They should put an asterisk at the end because that is a great gimmick that you can always pull out if your movie is bombing after a week. It's just like a failsafe of we're changing the title of the movie. It's a totally different movie. Come see it now. Just wild.
Yeah, I'm not a Marvel fan, and I probably should hold my tongue before I alienate half the audience.
That's fair. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in on this Wednesday night. At Jonas_Schaefer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner